2, 1. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you joined us today. We have our cups of coffee this morning, and
for us non-coffee drinkers,
well, tea.
I have.
Mine is actually it's a concoction of tea and a thing called Burn and just a tad of eVibe because I'm out, but y'all don't know what all those things are. So anyway, but it's a special concoction, and I just want to thank you for coming and remind you that I'm Carol Henderson and I have Life by Design. I'm helping people to look better, live better, and feel better so that they can live the second half of their life better than their first. So I want to introduce my co-host, ABarbaraEllison, and she'll tell you about her.
All right. Well, hi, I'm Barbara Ellison, as Carol said, and I am the founder of the Wellness Playroom, where wellness is not just about not being sick. It's about being the best ever version of yourself, physically, financially, emotionally. And it is just so fun to be able to help people to do that. So that's the Wellness Playroom, because I'm on a mission to make happiness the norm rather than the exception. Mm-hmm. And part of happiness is leading a happy, healthy, financially free, abundant life. So that's what the Wellness Playroom is all about. Mm-hmm. Anyways, we are so excited here to have today. We just Joy. Okay,
Joy brings joy.
No, do you normally go with the Pennington Arthur or just you do?
Normally, I just do the Joy Pennington Arthur just on Facebook so I can keep up with high school friends, that sort of thing. So yes, Joy Arthur is great.
Joy Arthur.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I'm going to tell on Joy for a second.
Oh, no.
She helped us do a webinar last week, and she was absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
And so we are just so excited to have her here today on Thoughtful Thursdays, because she's also had a journey. And we are so excited to hear her journey from where she started to now what she does now and why she became so good at what she did with us. So Joy, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. And I have to tell you, I love the Wellness Playroom. I love everything about that. I'm going to have to make me a little sign, Wellness Playroom. Changes everything, how we think mentally. Yeah, for me, at any rate. So it's very interesting when these two ladies asked me to join them, and we were having a little joke while ago, and I'm like, so what is it we're talking about? And if y'all are like us, you figure it out as you go. And I guess that's just part, I've always just figured it out as I went. I really have. So if we back up like a long time ago, I am from Fort Worth, Texas. We lived out in the country. I am one of 7, and I love everything about being one of 7. With my mother and dad made 9. We were kind of raised like everybody else that many years ago. Nobody really had a bunch of money. We really didn't. Everybody had big gardens. You had cows, you had chickens. So everything was like traded with your neighbor. If they had chickens and you needed meat, everything was swapped back and forth. So my family always brought I just can't even tell you how grateful I am for the parents that I was blessed with. And not even just the parents. I had aunts and uncles and cousins, and you never snapped black-eyed peas alone. It was an event in the backyard with the ice cream freezer going. So, my background was very, very simple, but somehow or another, with all of those 7 children that my parents had, never, ever was there a doubt how much they loved each other and how much they loved us. Now, let me tell you, we got our share of a little bit of whipping now and then when we just thought we were too big for our britches. So we kind of grew up a little bit old school that way. Mm-hmm. And Daddy just lined all 7 up. It was just easier to do all 7 rather than like spank one at a time. Everybody got a lick. The girls got hardly anything, but it looked like he was doing it. So part of our raising also was very humorous. But the one thing they taught us always was to love the Lord with all of our hearts. We were Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, like probably a lot of you were, that you went to church. But they also instilled in us that there wasn't anything that we could not do if we set our mind to it. And my very first instance of that memory, of that knowing you could do it, we had bought a new Shetland pony, and she was meaner than mean. And so she would take me to the fence every single solitary time. And it was a barbed wire fence, and she would rub me down the side of the fence. So it just cut my leg up. So I went in the house crying, and I did that about twice, and I knew Daddy was thinking, because I could tell he was thinking. And so about the third time I went in the house, all bloody and all that, and he said to me, that horse has begun to control you instead of you controlling the horse. Until you take control, nothing is going to change. She's going to take you to the fence. She's going to rub you off. She's going to bloody your leg, and you're going to cry and come in the house, and I'm not going to do anything about it because this is your ride.
Oh,
Yeah.
wise
It's a
saying.
good saying. This is your ride.
You're right.
Love that.
So I went back outside. I got on the horse again, and Daddy had taught me how to pull the reins around so that, he can this horse wouldn't even bite. She was that mean. Her name was Princess. I don't know why she got that name, because she was not a princess. But about that time that I went back out, knowing that that was my ride, I did some very hard things that were for me. I'm not a mean person. I wasn't mean to the horse, but I had to take charge. And I will never forget that statement that Daddy said to me, that you're the one in charge. And then we go a few years later down the road, and I get married, and my husband's in the military, and he's in California, and I'm in Texas. I have never been out of the state by myself alone, ever, never. I went to Colorado one time with my mother and dad in the car, and that's the only time I'd ever been out of Texas. So I'm going to San Francisco, California, which I know absolutely nothing about, nothing. And I even said to my mother, let's do this. So I can stay here with you and Daddy. And then, like when this military thing gets all, settled and done, then I'll go. And my mother said this to me, another big statement. She said, I won't always be here to take care of you. So you have to learn to take care of you. And I was like, I don't need to take care of myself right now. I like how you take care of me. And she said, I won't always be here to do that. You have to learn to take care of yourself and your family when it happens. And she packed up my suitcase, and we went to the airport, and she put me on the plane. And all my family was there. And there was probably enough tears to flood the airport, but there was no going back. I was not coming home. I had made the decision to be married. We had a beautiful wedding, we had all that, but the military was part of that deal. And I can remember so many times I would call Mother once a week, and then you call collect. Like nobody, like as young as we were, had home phones. And she would ask me how everything was, and I would say it was simply amazing. And it was absolutely horrible. But she taught me that I, once again, with the Lord's help, was the one that had to take care of myself and my family. And so luckily enough, just across the street from us was a church. And those people took us in like they had known us forever. And little did we know, the apartment house we had moved into was actually a part brothel. And that's why all these people were coming and going, and I couldn't figure it out. And then somebody got shot. So it was a little scary for this girl from Fort Worth, Texas, as young as I was. But the bottom line is that they taught us everything we knew, everything they could put in us to send us out on our way. So my first big job was a telephone operator, and I was operator number 42. And back then, I had a Southern drawl that was so bad. People would actually call in to, how you used to dial operator, you would dial O, and they would do the long distance calls. Well, that was me. But they would call in and literally ask for operator number 42 because they wanted to hear my Southern drawl. So that began my work history. My last time I had worked, I was like 13 years old, and I lied about how old I was to work at a 5-and-dime store because I wanted to buy my mother some china. Sometimes when I think back on this these stories. I just think, how did I do some of this? So I worked at 13, made enough money to buy my mother's china. And then, off to California I go. So we were there about a 2-year time period. And the biggest thing ever in my life happened. And my husband called and said, we're going to the Philippines. And I'm like, where is that?
Right.
It's a long way away. It's across the air. And so I started looking, I didn't Google because we didn't have that. I got the encyclopedia out. That was a long ways from Fort Worth, Texas, a long way from Fort Worth, Texas. But that was the beginning of my journey of learning to stand up for myself, to learn to care for other people. When I went to the Philippines, I was 8 months pregnant. We'd been married, I guess, about 3 years then. I was 8 months pregnant. It took me days and days to get out. The flights were all booked. It was military flights. By the time I got there, my ankles were this big around. And I promise you, I'm not kidding you. When my husband looked at me, he didn't say how beautiful and gorgeous I was with this big belly. He looked at my ankles and said, oh my goodness, is that going to be like that forever? I was like, no, they go down. And then, we had a little shower in our house that, keep in mind, it's made for a lot smaller people. And I was so big, I couldn't even get in the shower. And so my crowning moment of humility was like throwing water in a bucket on me in the shower because I was so big, I couldn't even get in the shower. So it was a crazy time. I was in a third world country I knew nothing about. I knew nobody. I was so pregnant. It wasn't even funny. So once again, we made our way to a church and I found some women that took me in and loved me and mentored me. And my favorite woman of all was Margot. Her name was Margot Coffey. I thought Margot wore her dresses too low. She thought I wore mine too short. So we had a rough start getting going. I didn't really like her. She didn't really like me, but we knew we were all each other had, and we had to get this deal figured out. And literally, probably 30, 40 years later, Margot has been my best friend and my go-to almost all of my adult life. She recently died of brain cancer, and that was a tough one to do. But boy, did she teach me things that I never knew I would even be able to do. We were out in a barrio with Filipino people and little children running everywhere. We didn't know if we were going to get back to the base or get hauled off, but we shared everything we had with people that didn't have anything. And those people taught me so beautifully. They didn't have a penny, probably not, well, it would be a centavo, but they would go and buy hot orange soda from the convenience store in the little barrio and put them in the creek bed to get them cold and share those with us when nobody had the money to go and buy those things. And so it seems like every step of my life, I learned a lot about how to give when there's really nothing inside you to give. And every one of us knows that. It might not be financially, it might be emotionally, it might be physically. Some of us have, amazing health, and some of us have little hiccups that we have to struggle with every now and then. But it still comes down to the fact that, like, how do you do what you do when you think you can't do it?
Right.
And so we were in the Philippines for 16 years. We had 2 different stays there. And I had my son, Brian, there. And then we brought home 2 Filipino children with us. And so it was funny. My brother said to my mother in a note that they were writing back and forth, he said, why does Joy, one of the children that we got was very, very sick. And he said, why does Joy always have to take the one that's sick? Why does she have to do that? And mother said, you know her. She's going to take care of that baby, and that baby will be fine. And that baby is now, oh my goodness, I'm getting old telling my age here, but she's 45 years old, has 2 precious children of her own. And so that was even like, I learned so much through learning to love children that you didn't give birth to. It's kind of easy to love the children you give birth to, But the middle child was not so easy that we adopted. He could throw a fit like nobody else could at 6 months old. So, and once again, my dear friend Margot helped me through that whole situation of loving and giving. And so I've been able to travel the world, which has been amazing. I've been to places I never thought I would be, and learn about people I never thought I would know. Some of my greatest learning experiences have come out of loss. While I was in the Philippines, almost ready to come home for Christmas with a little girl that my mother had never seen, and my mother died of an aneurysm. And so I just knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was going to whip this miracle together. And he didn't. He didn't. And I have to tell you, that was a hard one, being that far away and having her die and trying to get home. And so once again, you know, there were just lesson after lesson that I learned. You know, I stayed with my dad for about a month, and he was so graceful in his loss, because my mother was the love of his life, but he taught me grace in the middle of all of that. You know, it's like sometimes I would say, Daddy, why do people say, you know, she's better off? Well, she wasn't better off. I missed her, doggone it, and I wanted her there. And he taught me beautiful responses of grace. And my dad didn't say a lot, but when he said it, you needed to listen. So from there, I end up in corporate America as we come back to the United States to live. And so it's so funny how you get yourself into jobs that you have no idea how in the world to do. And I was looking for a bank and got lost and ended up in a Hilton hotel parking lot. And I called my sister. I'm like, I can't find this bank. I'm in this parking lot of the hotel. And she said, Joy, you just go in there and you get that job at that hotel. I said, I don't even know if they have a job in the hotel. She said, you can do this. You get in there right now. You talk your way to the manager. You find him and convince him to give you a job. I was like, Kathy, I can't. She was like, yes, you can. And she said, and I don't want to talk to you again until you've talked with him. I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this one? I mean, and she was serious. She was very serious. So I make my way into this hotel all dressed up in my finest. I asked for the general manager, who happens to be walking past me. And he just stops and looks at me and he goes, little girl, what are you selling? I said, I'm not selling anything. I'm truly not. And he goes, oh, everybody's selling something. I'm like, no, really, I'm not. I just want to talk to you about a job. He said, how do you know I have a job for you? I said, oh, I'm sure you have a place for me. He said, well, how do you know that? And I said, because and this is true, I said, I give the most amazing dinner parties you have ever seen in your life. And I know how to do hospitality. So whatever it is you want me to do here, I can do it, and I can do it really well. And he scratched his head and he said, I've never had anybody come in and talk to me like this, like tell me they don't know anything about the hotel business, but they can do it if they're taught. He said, if you have enough guts if you have enough guts to come in here and do this, then I have enough guts to hire you. And so we're going to do 3 months. And if you're not working out at the end of 3 months, I said, I will go on my merry way. You'll never see me again. Mm-hmm. At the end of 3 months, he comes into my office and I think, oh my gosh, this is the day he's going to tell me to go. I know he is. And he put me in charge of the corporate accounts. And so he said to me, well, do you have any idea at all what you've done? I said, not a clue. I just know I've put my head down and I've been busy and I've worked hard. He said, well, you have increased this market by 100% for this hotel.
Wow.
And so we think we want you to stay like years.
Oh, God.
I was totally shocked. And he gave me a raise. Yeah, so he gave me a raise and I got to keep the job. And so I called my family. I'm like, you're not even going to believe this one. And I would go to the library at night and read about how to do my job because I didn't know how to do it. But once again, that set of parents that I had that said, you can do whatever it is you set your mind to. Mm-hmm. And from there, I went to banking. And that was not nearly as much fun as the hotel business. So I did my stint in corporate banking. I always worked for the president. So I kind of had that public relations marketing thing going on. And then I truly found the public relations and marketing thing I loved. So I worked for convention and visitors bureaus and resort hotel settings for, I guess, about 25 years. And I loved everything about it.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this part, you work while everybody else is playing.
Right.
And when that big account shows up and they're going to spend, $75,000, you best had better be there. Or, if something went wrong, it was terrible. So I did that for many, many years. And it's so amazing to me how God works everything out. I so wanted to move back to Texas to be close to my family more than anything. And when I was on the resort setting, I had a friend that had a friend that had a friend that knew there was a job opening in Arlington, Texas. And once again, it was for something I'd never done. And so my friend Jeff said, Joy, this is your time. If you want to get back to Texas, I know you'll get this job. And so I went to work for this, it was a home healthcare company. I did all their marketing and public relations. The guy I worked for was bipolar. I learned a whole lot about what to do and what not to do. You had 2 minutes to give your spiel when you needed something, 2 minutes. And it better be 2 minutes of the fastest talking you've ever done. And he always said yes, but you were done in 2 minutes because he couldn't concentrate past then. And so that whole thing brought me full circle back to where all of my family was. And just about that same time, I had been introduced to multi-level marketing, which I had no idea about. I had no idea how that worked. I just knew I took this product and I felt amazing. And the women I worked with were lined up outside my door saying, we know you're doing something and you're not telling us. You're not hitting the Diet Coke machine all day long because, in the hotel business, you have like free soda or free coffee for whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And so I jumped into, oh my gosh, it was the scariest time ever for me, because I mean, really, I did not think I was going to be able to do it. I really didn't. And I found out that if I just talked to people like they were my friends and not my prospect, then they too might possibly join my journey. And so I was working full time, and I would do calls in the morning on the way there. I would do calls in the afternoon on the way home. Then I would come home and help my husband with the part that he needed me to help him with. And we actually gained millionaire status in that company. And while that was beautiful and that was great, the relationships that I made along the way were even more amazing. And the growth I found in myself was more than I ever dreamt of. I mean, I thought I was kind of doing pretty good, but holy cow, when I found out even more about giving and sharing, and I felt like I was truly always very authentic, but fear held me back with a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn to step through that fear. One time I found myself on the tallest telephone pole you could ever imagine, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And I had to go down a different way than I came up. I was harnessed up, but I had to lean off that telephone pole to fall. So they asked me, what is your word before you fall? If you have one word while you're up on this telephone pole, what is your word? And I said, my word was grace. And I just feel like grace has always been something in my life that I could give to others, but it was always hard to give to myself. I think we're probably all like that. We're so hard on ourselves.
We are.
So terribly hard on ourselves. And so I learned about giving grace to not only other people, but to myself. And so it's kind of a fast journey there. But in the middle of all that, there were 3 children. My first marriage did not work out, unfortunately, 27 years. And we knew it wasn't going to work, but we were very cordial until our children left. And then I truly did meet the love of my life. And I've been married to him for 25 years and known him 2 years before that. So I've been married like all of my adult life. Right. Which probably all.
Me too. But just two different men.
Yeah. so it's funny because with the journey with my sweetheart, Robert, oh my gosh, when I married Robert, my sister said to me, you better hang on to that saddle tight because you're going to be on the ride of your life. And I have been. I have been. So while I am the planner and very methodical, Robert is more of let's do this on a wing and a prayer.
Right.
And so once again, I've learned how to let go. Just another learning thing that happens is about letting go and letting the process happen. What's the worst? I always tell, I tutor some students at school in the middle school level, and I tell them all the time, so what is the worst that could happen? Nobody bled, nobody died, so you can do this. So if you have to stand in front of somebody, I want you to remember Miss Arthur saying to you, nobody bled, nobody died by standing up there, so let's do it. And so one of the things I love so much about tutoring is being able to teach the children, these students, so much of what I was taught. Right. And what I had to really learn the hard way that made me who I am. Mm-hmm. We've talked a little bit about seasons of life. Right. So as I'm in this older season of life, I honestly don't know what I would do if I hadn't had all the growing, all the learning that I've had, because the first season is great, the second, the third, the fourth, but this older season gets a little bit more challenging. You lose friends that you had no idea you were gonna lose, and that's been a really hard thing. And and then as you get older, you are different. There's no ways about it. Right. Always had this amazing energy. And while I still have like more energy than most people my age, still there are times that I feel like, I just don't have what I need to make it through this last stage of life and be everything I want it to be. But what I know is that God has supplied everything I need. Right. Every single, not once has God never supplied it or made it there for me or my family. Not once. Sometimes it took me a while to see it, as I'm sure it does all of you. But somehow or another, I was always blessed and got through it. And so I've just had a fun career, fun life, close to my children.
We've enjoyed being part of it in our little small way.
Yes, and this is so much fun to hear the background and such. Barbara and I have actually been guests in Joy's home, and she has a beautiful home and is such a gracious hostess. And it's been a blessing. I'm so glad that I met Robert and Joy almost a year ago.
Yeah, it's almost a year ago.
And so
no, go ahead.
No, I was just saying we were just so excited to get you here on our show.
Thank you.
This is we were talking about ahead of time, is that every one of us has a story.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And it's so fun to hear some of the backstory of because so often we beat ourselves. One of the things that I work with is we beat ourselves up for the things that we're not, instead of celebrating the things that we are. So it is so nice to hear some of the great things, but some of the struggles too.
Oh, without a doubt.
We all have struggles. I mean, when my husband passed away, it was like, oh brother, how was I going to go on? And I had no idea who I was outside of all the labels that I had put on myself.
Right. That's half of yourself that left. Yeah.
Yes. Then there was me. I was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for the people that have come into my life to help me.
Showed up.
That showed up. That God's, God, and talk about it was God's grace to me of just the people that showed up, and with Carol and with Robert, and Robert was very patient with me.
Yeah. Robert is just, I always say, if you run over Robert 3 times with a car, he would be certain there's some reason you did that. Like it had to happen. And he would forgive you every time. I mean, he's that patient and long suffering, you know.
And he'd probably get up and repair your car for you.
Yes, he probably would. Yeah, no, he would call somebody. He's not good on that car repair thing. He's good at a lot of things, but don't give him the car repair. But you know, I think as we wrap this whole thing up, you know, I think of the things that that I've learned, and I think of just how across the board, especially with these last few years with COVID and pandemic and all this crazy stuff, you know, it's like sometimes holding on with everything you have, knowing it's going to be okay, knowing that you have to believe in your heart of hearts that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Boy, it's a tough one sometimes. And never have I learned more that it's okay to call one of my sisters or a best friend or somebody and say, I'm really struggling today. I am afraid. I am. I don't know where this world is going. And I know what happens in the end. I've read the book. I've got to the end. But all this in between stuff is scary, scary, scary.
Yeah.
And you know, that's hard for people like all of us that we kind of like think we can pretty much fix anything. But you know, we can't fix everything in this world right now.
Right.
And so what I've had to do is concentrate so much on the good, on the amazing, on the wonderful.
Yeah.
I've just like, there are times I've had to like put things around my house to remind me where my mind is thinking, you know, not to let the troubles seep in, because the devil does come to steal joy, to steal, kill, and destroy.
Yes.
And so it's always in my mind to think, how can I do this where not only do I give the glory to God, I give the glory to my family. They're proud of what I do and love who I am. But in the end of all end things, I have to know that life is here for a purpose, and what we do matters more than we will ever know. And when I have that student that I haven't seen in a year and comes up and he hugs me and says, because of you, I stayed in that class. I wanted to leave that class. I hated that class, but you just kept telling me it was going to get better. And guess what, Miss Arthur, it got better. Well, life does get better. It really does. Even when it's scary. Even when we think it's impossible. Yeah. Even when fear overtakes us, it gets better.
Well, and all I would say is that you've got to be grounded in the word. You have to know what the back of the book says, but you have to know everything you don't have to know everything, but you need to be well grounded in the middle. You know, if you don't know the middle, you don't know that it's okay. And things, in my opinion, are probably even going to get a little bit rougher before they get better, but they will get better. We are promised the better.
Yeah.
And especially as believers, we are promised the better. And so that's one thing that excites me. And it's the giving of grace, and it's the loving others that keeps us in that safe place. Now, I'm not saying, Keith and I've coined a word, sloppy agape. And that means, you know, that oh, well, yeah, that my child is in sin, but I'm just going to keep loving them. Well, there is a thing called tough love, where you have to sometimes give them a spanking, or you have to correct them, or you have to put them back on that horse in the barbed wire corral.
Yeah.
Because if they had just kept coddling you, you would not have learned that major thing in your life. And so we don't want people to get into sloppy agape, but to love, well, love like Jesus loved. You know, he loved everyone, and yet he turned over the tables and the money changers and hit them with a whip. So that's my 2 cents.
I don't want you to think by any stretch of the imagination that all of this whole stretch has been perfect.
No.
Far from it.
Amazing, because there are some times that it really sucked and it wasn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be. But you know, it was part of what I was given by my family and my parents. And you know, we've always been blessed with beautiful friends, and it was part of all that got me through just a whole lot of that. And just
Mhm.
know that if you're struggling, you don't have to do it by yourself. There really are
Exactly.
people that, you know, I found out they don't think bad of you at all when you say, I'm really struggling with this. They
No,
really don't.
but it's the way you word it. You don't belittle God. You don't belittle yourself. You don't belittle your friends. You're going, I'm fighting pain. I'm fighting depression. It's like, don't take it on. Don't say I'm depressed. And it goes back to when you talk to your mom, Colette, it's like, how are things? They're
Yeah.
great, Mom. It's beautiful here. It's
Mhm.
going to work.
Yeah.
And yes, there are times like during a grief process that you do need a shoulder to cry on, but those are really far and few if you
Yeah.
really look at the whole.
And you know, it's very
human
interesting
life.
because when my mother died, I was really angry with God. I
Mhm.
mean, I wasn't angry. I was really pissed off, if you want to know the truth. I
Yeah.
was really, and you know, we were at the burial and literally I just walked away, you know, after it was kind of said and done. I just walked away and I was like, God, why? Of all the people you could take, why would you take her? Seriously? Like when the new preacher came to church, she would have the pie baked, she would have the flowers there, she would be there to greet him, to show him how beautiful his office was. Why would you take her? And then about 5 years later, I met a lady in a nursing home that I volunteered to do hair, you know, like you can go and wash their hair and stuff. And she was in her wheelchair and she looked so much like my mother. And she had her makeup on, she had her hair fixed, and she was drooling. And she couldn't get her hand up because it wouldn't work to wipe her face off. And my mother used to say to us all the time, don't you ever let me lay in a bed like some of these open, don't you? I mean, she didn't mind dying. She was just real picky about how she went. And she didn't want a fire. She didn't want a car wreck. She didn't want this. Well, she always said, I just want to go to the garden and pick up my hoe and die that way. Well, that's how she died. They found her in the garden. And so when I saw that woman that could not wipe her own mouth, I said to God, I totally get it. I really get it. And I'm sorry. But you know, he never went away from me. I was the one. He was probably just going like, would you hurry up already? We know what's going to happen. But I was so hurt, just so hurt that I had to work through that. And never once ever was I ever left. And even then, God sent people to me. You know, when I had to go back to the Philippines and I would get the kids off to school and go back to bed and cry literally for 6 weeks. I mean, my heart was broken. And this guy that we had at church, he's about 6'8", about this big, like a big old linebacker. And he just came into the house one day and there we were able to have household help. And her name was Letitia, and she said, Miss Joy is in the bed. She's not feeling well. And he said, I'm going to take care of that. And he busted open that door. Thank goodness I had him closed. He said, it is time for you to get out of the bed. I said, you do not understand. He said, I do understand. And you're getting out of the bed today, and this is not happening again.
Oh,
What was
wow.
I
That
to
is
do?
so cool. Joy,
was
we
I
are
to do?
out of time. We're fixing to get cut off. So
Oh,
we may
thank you.
have to
I
have
enjoyed
you
it
back
so
for
much.
some more stories because
We're gonna have,
you're well.
Yeah.
You're a well.
Thank you. Thank
But
you.
bye, everybody.
Bye.
have a good one.
Thank you.